5. Longest rivers on the earth. Rivers have been a source of food since prehistory. They are often a rich source of fish and other edible aquatic life, and are a major source of fresh water, which can be used for drinking and irrigation. Most of the major cities of the world are situated on the banks of rivers. Rivers plays an important role. They provide cheap transportation, electricity, water for farm, and the livelihood. Let's start with the 5th longest river in the world. Yenisei River. Yenisei is a river in Siberia, the largest system flowing to the Arctic Ocean. The length of the Yenisei is almost 2,136 miles, 3,500 kilometers. The mighty Yenisei River is fairly considered one of the most significant in the world, flowing through the territory of Siberia and flowing into the Kara Sea. The Yenisei has a huge influence on the climate, not only in the adjacent areas, but in general. If it were not, the climate on our planet would probably be different. Nearly 1,000 other rivers flow into the Yenisei, feeding it with their waters. The name of this river comes from the Evenk language. Yenisei from the language is translated as big water. In the water basin of the Yenisei are about 100,000 lakes. Yenisei pours out almost 20,000 cubic meters of water to the Kara Sea every second. At the widest point, the width of the Yenisei is about 20 kilometers during the spring flood, because of the powerful floods. On most of the banks of the Yenisei, people do not live, preferring to settle at a distance from the mighty river. The Mississippi-Missouri River System, as one continuous river, is 4th largest river system in the world, and it is longest river on the North American continent. The Mississippi River is 2nd largest drainage system on the North American continent, second only to the Hudson Bay drainage system. The Missouri River, Mississippi River, and Jefferson River combine to form the system, at a total length of 3,979 miles, 6,352 kilometers. Mississippi ends at the river delta near New Orleans, and into the Gulf of Mexico, that is a part of the Atlantic Ocean. Mississippi is one of the world's major river systems in size, habitat diversity, and biological productivity. Its drainage basin collects water from 41% of the contiguous United States, covering a total area of more than 1 million square miles, and touching 31 U.S. states and 2 Canadian provinces in all. At its widest point, the Mississippi River stretches out over 7 miles in width. The Mississippi River's deepest spot is located in New Orleans near Algiers Point. The river is approximately 200 feet deep there. It is estimated that 18 million people, or more than 50 cities, rely on the Mississippi for their daily water supply. More than 170 bridges, including automobile, foot, and railroad, span the Mississippi River. The Mississippi River got its name from the Ojibwe Indians, who called the river Mississippi, which meant Great River. Even though it is longer by just a little bit, the Missouri is considered a tributary to the Mississippi. The Mississippi River begins at Lake Itasca in Minnesota, starts in Lake Itasca in northern Minnesota, and ends in the Gulf of Mexico. It is also one of the world's most important commercial waterways, and one of North America's great migration routes for both birds and fishes. Native Americans lived along its banks, and used the river for sustenance and transportation. Early European explorers used the Mississippi to explore the interior and the northern reaches of what was to become the United States. Settlers from Europe and the United States, and often their slaves, arrived on steamboats, dispossessing the Native Americans of their lands and converting the landscape into farms and cities. Today, the Mississippi River powers a significant segment of the economy in the upper Midwest. Barges and their tows move approximately 175 million tons of freight each year on the upper Mississippi through a system of 29 locks and dams. It is also a major recreational resource for boaters, canoeists, hunters, anglers, and bird watchers, and offers many outdoor opportunities. Agriculture has been the dominant land use for nearly 200 years in the Mississippi Basin, and has altered the hydrologic cycle and energy budget of the region. The agricultural products and a huge agribusiness industry that has developed in the basin produce 92% of the nation's agricultural exports. 60% of all grain exported from the U.S. is shipped on the Mississippi River through the Port of New Orleans and the Port of South Louisiana. On the third number, we have Yangtze River. In China, the Yangtze River is called Changjiang, meaning long river or the Yangtze. It is the longest river in Asia, and the longest river to flow entirely within one country. This river plays an important and large role in the history, culture and economy of China. It is the world's sixth largest river by volume of water discharged. It drains 1/5 of the land area of China, and its river basin is home to 1/3 of the country's population, about 400 million people. Stretching from a land of remote mountains and arid plains, it winds its way through canyon gorges to fertile regions of connecting lakes and waterways. The river has over 700 tributaries. Among the countless scenic sights, the Three Gorges is the most amazing landscape. The Three Gorges Dam on this river is the largest hydroelectric power producer in the world. The Yangtze River has been an important transportation route in China for over 2,000 years, with settlements along its banks dating back to the earliest human civilizations. The Yangtze River basin accounts for 40% of China's freshwater resources, more than 70% of the country's rice production, 50% of its grain, more than 70% of fishery production, and 40% of China's GDP. The most threatened crocodilian species in the world, the Chinese alligator, is only found in the lower reaches of the Yangtze. Bridges over the Yangtze, including some of the longest and tallest bridges in the world, like the Runyang Bridge and Sutong Bridge. The river is one of the world's busiest waterways. The earliest evidence of human activity on the banks of the Yangtze River dates 27,000 years ago. And now next two rivers we have are the most unique ones, but there is dispute regarding their length. While debate as to whether the Amazon or the Nile is the world's longest river has gone on for many years, the historic consensus of geographic authorities has been to regard the Amazon as the second longest river in the world, with the Nile being the longest. However, the Amazon has been measured by different geographers as being anywhere between 3,889 and 4,345 miles long. It is often said to be at least 4,000 miles long. The Nile is reported to be anywhere from 3,417 to 4,157 miles. Often it is said to be about 4,130 miles long. There are many factors that can affect these measurements. A study by Brazilian scientists concluded that the Amazon is actually longer than the Nile, using Nevadomysmi, which in 2001 was labeled by the National Geographic Society as the Amazon source. These scientists made new calculations of the Amazon's length. They calculated the Amazon's length as 4,345 miles. Using the same techniques, they calculated the length of the Nile as 4,258 miles, which is longer than previous estimates but still shorter than the Amazon. Measuring a river's length is difficult because sometimes it is not clearly known where the river starts and ends. While tradition says the Nile is the longest river of the world, some recent Brazilian and Peruvian studies suggest that the Amazon is longer. However, keeping with the tradition, let's consider the Nile River is the longest, with the Amazon following next. So let's go to second longest river. The Amazon River, flowing in South America into the Atlantic, has the largest drainage basin in the world. In the upper stretches, above its meeting with the Rio Negro, the river is called Solimões in Brazil. In Peru, Colombia, Ecuador and the remaining Spanish-speaking world, the river is called Amazon. The Amazon rainforest is the richest tropical forest in the world in terms of biodiversity. More than 1/3 of all known species reside in this giant forest. Interestingly, there are no bridges to cross over the river. That's because most of the river flows through rainforests and not roads or cities. The Amazon originates from a cliff at Mismi, with a sole sign of a wooden cross. Mismi is an 18,363 feet mountain peak of volcanic origin in the Chilla mountain range in the Andes of Peru. A glacial stream on the Mismi was firmly identified as the most distant source of the Amazon River in 1996. The total length of the river is at least 4,345 miles, which makes it slightly longer than the Nile River, which is 4,258 miles, but still the equivalent of the distance from Florida to London. At an average discharge of about 7,400,000 cubic feet per second. That makes Amazon River is the largest river by discharge of water in the world. Its discharge is greater than the next 7 largest independent rivers combined. Amazon River represents 20% of the global riverine discharge to the ocean. During the wet season, the Amazon River can reach over 155 miles in width. Amazon's depth in its lowermost section averages 66 to 164 feet, and in some places as much as 330 feet. The Amazon Basin is the largest drainage basin in the world, with an area of approximately 2,720,000 square miles. The portion of the river's drainage basin in Brazil alone is larger than any other river's basin. The Amazon enters Brazil with only 1/5 of the flow it finally discharges into the Atlantic Ocean, yet already has a greater flow at this point than the discharge of any other river. The Amazon is responsible for about 20% of the Earth's fresh water entering the ocean. There are no bridges that cross the Amazon, mostly because of its huge width. The longest snake in the world, Anaconda, lurks in the shallow waters of the Amazon basin. More than 1/3 of all known species in the world live in the Amazon rainforest. It is the richest tropical forest in the world in terms of biodiversity. Scientists believe that there are many species which are yet to be discovered. It has over 1,000 tributaries and 17 of them are over 932 miles long. Because of its vastness, it is sometimes called as the River Sea. Well, that's amazing, isn't it? Next one is of the longest river on the earth, Nile. The Nile River, located in northeastern Africa, is the chief source of water in Egypt and Sudan. Its water resources are shared by 11 countries including Tanzania, Kenya, Egypt, and Sudan. Ancient Egypt was incredibly lucky, but it used that luck masterfully. The Greek historian Herodotus, who said, "Egypt is the gift of the Nile." Every year in Egypt, the Nile overflows and creates a rich valley of black soil that is abundantly fertile. This fertility was central to Egyptian civilization. Created, the Nile River has 2 major tributaries, the White Nile and the Blue Nile. The White Nile is the primary source and the Blue Nile is the secondary source of the Nile River. Most of the historical sites of ancient Egypt are located along the banks of the Nile. The Nile is an unusual river. It is a very large river. It flows north, and it has a very large fan-like delta well suited for agriculture. But, more importantly, it flows through an extremely arid desert, making it almost the only water source for a very large area. Ancient Egypt was long secure because the surrounding deserts made invasion almost impossible till invaders worked up solutions. The sheer volume of water allowed for immense agricultural areas to grow a great deal of food, which in turn allowed a population to expand and devote time to crafts, building, mining, and politics. There was usually enough excess grain to export, bringing the world to Egypt. Being a very narrowly defined river and agricultural land, there were rather slight cultural differences for the government to deal with, allowing for a more easily controlled and uniform Egyptian culture. The river allowed for a lot of sailing and transport, and of course, fishing. There are at least a dozen nearby nations who can only wish they had a Nile. The sheer blessings of the river gave the rulers and ruling classes a very lopsided level of wealth and power, which allowed them to develop the art and architecture we know now as classic Egypt and its empire. In their minds and religion, the Nile was, and to a fair degree is, the source of Egypt. Over 350 million people in Eastern Africa live in its basin. That's a lot of people. More than live in the United States. In fact, most of the population and all of the cities in Egypt that aren't on the coast are on the Nile River. A lot of people in multiple countries depend on the river for their livelihood and even their very survival, especially in the dry Sahara that most of the river runs through. So, these are the 5 longest rivers on the earth. If you enjoyed watching this video, I do appreciate it if you hit the little thumbs up like button,